Today we are proud to introduce the Treasury Laws Amendment More Cost of Living Relief Bill 2025.
A coalition government will halve the fuel excise for 12 months. And then we'll review it. And we'll make sure that that comes in on the first day that our parliament sits.
It has felt like the longest anticipated election campaign in history.
This election is a choice between Labor's plan to keep building or Peter Dutton's promise to cut. That is the choice. That is your choice.
Australian families need relief now, and we must do better, and there is a better way. And the Coalition has an achievable plan to get our country back on track.
Hello, Dante.
On one level, there was the usual brandishing of policy promises.
We will make price gouging by Australian supermarkets illegal.
Labor has picked up the Greens' policy to make supermarket price gouging illegal, and that's great news for Australian shoppers.
But in this election, on one side of politics in particular, the policies were often scant on detail.
We will immediately introduce an East Coast gas reservation.
There were the campaign atmospherics and images, intended or otherwise.
We would live in Kirribilli. It's we love Sydney, love the harbour.
No, I stepped back one step. I didn't fall off the stage.
But two features of this campaign had not been anticipated when the Coalition had for so long seemed to control the political debate. The first was just how badly prepared the Coalition was, the lack of detailed policies, the backflips, the lack of practice at handling day-to-day scrutiny. The second was the impact of Donald Trump. The government went into the campaign having recovered from grim polling figures at the end of last year, but its primary vote was still dangerously weak. Labor had used the budget as a platform for major cost of living policies. The Coalition promised to cut in fuel excise and repeatedly promised there was more to come.
We will have, in terms of our offering at the next election, a definite plan about how we can reduce prices. Thank you, guys.
But a large rock was about to be thrown into the campaign, not to mention the global world order.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike.
This is not the act of a friend.
I do think this is a bad day for our country, and it's not the treatment that Australians deserve.
Global markets shook, world leaders contemplated new world chaos, and the penguins on Heard Island found themselves at the centre of the international trade debate. On the election trail, the new uncertainty saw shifts in political rhetoric about the US president, but no real change from the focus on domestic issues. But things were about to get messy for the opposition.
Got him.
Labor has made work from home a right for the individual, not an arrangement that works for all. And this is unsustainable.
We've made a mistake in relation to this policy, Sarah, and I think it's important that we say that and recognise it. We apologise for that and we've dealt with it.
There were backflips, and then there were policies that just got more confusing. The Coalition had long claimed big public service cuts as a major budget saving, but this policy was to end up in as much trouble as the work from home policy.
You have a policy of reducing the public service by 41,000 places.
In Canberra, we're not reducing the public service.
So only in Canberra.
Been very clear about that.
The controversy over work from home and public servants set a pattern. The story of the campaign has been overwhelmingly about the Coalition and its policies, not the government, not even Donald Trump. The campaign has been about a lack of coherent policies and silence about policies that had already been announced. The Coalition's most expensive pledge and also biggest political risk was nuclear energy. Peter Dutton never visited the sites of the nuclear power plants he was proposing.
You haven't visited any potential nuclear sites, including the one here at Liddell, just an hour away.
We're not going to be able to meet every Australian.
The Coalition tried to keep the focus on the economy and voter discontent with the cost of living over the past 3 years.
The question I think Australians will be asking themselves and need to ask themselves is, are you better off or worse off than you were 3 years ago?
But a cut in interest rates before the campaign and good news on inflation at its end blunted the message, even as the outlook for the global economy was getting darker.
We've got growth rebounding in our economy, and the private sector is resuming its rightful role as the primary driver of that growth, and private demand as a consequence is expected to more than double next year.
The government was focusing heavily on Medicare throughout the campaign.
Our government will expand the bulk billing incentive to cover all Australians.
Dismissing doctors' warnings that the scheme would not work, while the Greens laid out an ambitious agenda.
We need public services that, wait for it, just work. Whether it's housing, health, education, public transport, these can be world-class, provided free or heavily subsidised, like 50-cent fares for buses, trains, ferries and trams.
So we can make Australia great again.
The shadow of Trumpian politics continued to haunt the coalition, and other policies seemed to disappear or be abandoned, such as one to make business lunches tax deductible for small business. There was confusion too over tax breaks for electric vehicles and a refusal to outline how it would cut 100,000 migrant arrivals.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 3 years, the Albanese government's weak leadership and bad decisions have compromised community safety and national security.
The two major parties went on a vote-buying spree at their campaign launches, with the coalition fighting a sinking primary vote and voter approval of its leader.
A coalition government will deliver a one-off cost of living tax offset.
A re-elected Labor government will create a new $1,000 instant tax deduction.
A coalition government will allow you to deduct interest payments on the first $650,000 of a mortgage against your taxable income.
Under a Labor government, you'll be able to buy your first home with just a 5% deposit.
But unfortunate moments continued on the campaign trail.
You're doing pretty well yourself. Why won't you support him a bit and give him a bit of help with getting his house?
I haven't finished the excellent points I was making.
Really? You're not willing to say this is climate change happening right now?
I don't know, David, because I'm not a scientist.
There were campaigning problems for the independents too.
I'm taking the sign down. What are you doing that for? Because it's on public land. It's not on...
Who are you?
Three weeks in, Labor's primary vote was starting to lift. The coalition primary vote and Peter Dutton's personal approval were continuing to slide.
What happened in 2019, there weren't too many people predicting a coalition victory. There is an enormous soft vote. We are the underdog.
This election is certainly up for grabs. And I remind colleagues that 2019, the bookies paid out. And guess what? That didn't occur.
There you go.
The coalition's capacity to reinvigorate its campaign and stem the decline was hampered by Easter and Anzac Day holidays. The opposition leader announced his biggest short-term spending commitment on defence 2 days before the National Day of Commemoration.
Today we make a very significant announcement of over $20 billion to defence over the course of the next 5 years.
The problem is that the coalition is not telling the Australian people where the cuts will come from to pay for their nuclear reactors or where the trade-offs will come from when it comes to this defence spending.
In 1983, a desperate Malcolm Fraser warned voters their money would be safer under the bed if Bob Hawke's Labor defeated his government. The coalition has complained that Labor is running a scare campaign against it on Medicare. But Peter Dutton is finishing his campaign with no fewer than 3 scare campaigns about secret Labor plans on negative gearing, an inheritance tax and for an Indigenous voice. He's gone back to culture wars on law and order, welcomes to country and school curriculums. Perhaps the final public sign of the campaign in trouble was an attack on the journalists covering his campaign.
I just think they're so biased, and many of them just activists, not journalists.
It all suggests Peter Dutton thinks he's going to lose. His colleagues are already asking how it has come to this.
And Laura Tingle joined me earlier. So Laura, obviously ends of campaigns are nerve-wracking for everybody. In the United States, they call bad things that happen right at the end the October surprise, the unexpected thing that derails an American election coming in November. Have we had anything that qualifies as an October surprise here?
I think the closest equivalent in the last 24 hours, Sarah, has been the One Nation wobble, shall we call it, and also the voice wobble. There's been a lot of talk this week, as we've discussed, about the fact that One Nation is heavily preferencing the coalition in some seats. But in the last couple of days, Penny Wong made a comment on the Batuta Talks podcast about the voice and said that, you know, people would look back on it in 10 years' time, like they look back now at gay marriage. That's taken off, and this morning on both sides of politics, people were saying that this was biting in a lot of electorates like Tangney in Western Australia, McEwen in Victoria, Blair in Queensland.
And what's, just to understand the impact of this, is it the suggestion that the voice could come back in a legislated form?
Yeah, this is the suggestion that there is a secret plan by the Labor government to bring back legislation for the voice. Now, I think the bottom line of this is it's not about whether they bring back legislation, because you can always knock that off, but the suggestion, which has been pushed very hard by the News Corp papers and by figures like Tony Abbott, is that this is essentially, as I think Tony Abbott said, the government giving the two-finger salute to the electorate, because they've made it clear they're not interested in the voice, and the suggestion is that this is, you know, the elites insisting on imposing this on people.
Do you think it cuts through? The Prime Minister's pushed it back categorically whenever asked, hasn't he? And I think up to and including today.
Yeah, the Prime Minister and all Cabinet Ministers have flatly said no, it's not happening. But it has been latched onto as a scare tactic. And it's interesting because it's been latched onto in ways that several other scare campaigns that have been running haven't taken off, like inheritance taxes and negative gearing. This one seems to have cut through. And I suppose when it comes down to it at the end of the day, it goes to that point of all of that anger that we were talking about before the campaign started, about people feeling disconnected and disengaged and not listened to. It's still there and it latches onto some issue like this and still works its way through the system. Possibly not through a huge change in the major party votes, but possibly in increased support for those minor parties.
Laura, thank you very much. We'll be spending a lot of time together tomorrow. See you then.
Thanks, Sarah.